Welcome back, patrons, to the Terrain Studio. I'm your host, Sean Morris. On this month's Patreon update, it's going to be a little bit of a different one. In fact, it's going to be in line with our new format here. So I'm just going to do a little bit of a brief introduction here. Then I'm going to go ahead and show the update video that has been pre-recorded. The video is basically just going to give you a brief synopsis, walk you through the Kashyyyk build up to this point, kind of give you a little bit of the highlights as to what has been completed thus far. I'm going to come back at the end of the video and talk about the steps going forward and what you're going to see in this month's how-to. I'm going to do another one, so you get one more video this month, so really jam-packing the end, and then we're going to roll over to those weekly updates moving forward. So hopefully you guys are excited about this. The build is really taking shape. It's a little unfortunate that I didn't get to film more of the process along the way, but there's been so much learning on this project that it's been a little bit difficult to know exactly what to film. I have my head wrapped around it, and I feel pretty confident in terms of what I can show you going forward. We have a lot more of the project left to come, so don't be disappointed that you missed anything. I'll do my very best to recap or fill in all the blanks, and if you want to see anything that I didn't cover, feel free to fire that in the comments. I'll go back and make sure I record or at least give you an overview of what it is that you missed, if not in a how-to, certainly in the weekly updates. So without further ado, let's get into this month's recap video. Welcome everyone to another episode of the Terrain Studio. I'm your host, Sean Morris. On this month's Patreon update video, I'm bringing you guys up to speed on a project that I've been working on for the last 6 weeks. If you've been following the Patreon, you'll notice that I've been posting photos and doing a lot of live builds reference the Kashyyyk project. I do want to send out a special thank you to the patrons for last month's pledge to allow me to do public videos and a lot of live streams. It was really great while everyone was kind of stuck at home. And although I know people are still stuck at home, I wanted to get back on track with the Patreon videos for you. So let's talk a little bit about the unique challenges of this project. It's a super large project for one thing. However, it's a large element on a relatively small project, and that's where the challenge comes in. This tree dominates a fairly large footprint on a relatively small play surface, a 3x3 surface with roughly a 2-foot footprint. So one of the things that I've had to do is incorporate elements within the tree to allow me to recapture some of that play surface. I've done that via platforms and various other structures, and I'll get into that a little bit more in depth in this video. What I want to do in this video is really kind of bring you guys back up to speed, or up to speed rather, with the project. So I'm going to talk a little bit about each feature, sort of walk you through and give you sort of a synopsis of exactly what I did. I also want to highlight where I'm going to go with this project and talk about some of the upcoming how-tos and the processes that need to happen. We also have an entire table that we need to build around it, but that's going to be for another video. So let's get into this project and start talking about some of the specific elements. So it seems only natural that we would start at the bottom of the tree and work our way up. So the first element that I wanted to talk about was the bottom platforms. The primary purpose of these platforms was to actually regain the real estate that was lost by the footprint of the tree itself. And so what I mean by that was these become playable surface that the base of the tree occupied. And so obviously we need to create some sort of way for players to get up and interact with these, and that's yet to come. However, let's talk a little bit about the base construction of these. So the primary materials used here were tin or metal stovetop covers, the element covers. In addition, I used wood skewers to go over that. And I created the bottom using a plastic card. So I cut a large circle and I fit that and conformed it to making these conical shapes underneath the platforms. I used a radiating pattern of the skewers just to kind of give this nice unique wood look, and it has kind of a base color, a couple browns, and then a nice soft ink to go over that. It's going to have some elements touched up. The tree itself is going to get painted, and so there needs to be still some work applied to this, but primarily they're in position. I cut little grooves into the tree, so these are actually secured within the tree itself. However, they're free floating, and you can kind of see that as I rotate the project around. So it really kind of captures that Kashyyyk look, and I'm pretty impressed with how these came out. So let's continue our journey up the tree. Okay, as we migrate up the tree, I can't help but have that sense of the friendly giant look up, up, look way up. But that's just me. But as we move up the tree, what we have here is we have one of the radiating branches. Now, there's not a lot of branches on this tree that are captured here at the lower level, but I did want to incorporate one, and primarily because I wanted to incorporate some foliage here at the lower level. I'm going to talk specifically about the foliage. I had a slight change of plan, change of heart, if you will, while making this project. So I want to kind of explain that and show you how I'm going to kind of recapture some of that feel of greenery within this tree. Here I'm also highlighting a couple features. You're going to notice that I have some of these branches that are wrapped in green and some that are still this exposed brown, as well as some of the pink that I have here. There's a lot going on here, and I left this purposefully in stages just to explain the process. So first and foremost, I carved out some layered foam here to give the overall bulky tree structure. Then what I did is I punched some holes. In fact, I actually used a hot wire foam cutter to punch through. And then I laced in and twisted some of this wire. This is just standard hardware store wire. It is a little bit more rigid, so if you are looking for that, make sure that you can bend it and it will keep the shape. This stuff is great for that. Then I just gave it a little bit of twist and a little bit of a twist and a turn here, and I created these branches. Next, what I did is I used this green floral tape. This stuff here, primarily what I'm doing is I'm trying to cover the very slippery surface of this wire, as well as I'm trying to create a little bit more surface area for the later contact of the celluclay, and we'll get into more about that. Specifically, we have a how-to coming up for that next month. And so I've just covered this tree with the floral tape and all of the exposed branches. And you're going to see some more as we move up the tree as well. You're also going to notice that there's these weird tinfoil patches that are protruding and all around the base of the tree, as well as through the branches as we move up. Now, these are going to create some of the undertones, the understructures, if you will, for the celluclay application. Part of the kashik trees, they are very almost rock-like in certain sections. And so I thought the best way to replicate that was to actually build out with some aluminum foil. It's going to give the celluclay not necessarily the texture that's here, but we'll re-achieve that actually by using some tin foil or aluminum foil afterwards to kind of punch that pattern back in. But you'll just notice that I've created some protrusions, some ribs, and just basically some otherwise knotty sections of the tree. That's knotty as in wood and not as in bad. And so that's replicated throughout the tree, but I thought this shot really showed that to you. So let's give the tree a little spin and get to the other side. So we got a lot going on at this portion here of the tree. You're actually seeing some of the structural elements start to take shape here. This one has a removable roof at this point, just for construction. It needs to be painted a little bit. However, I did want to talk a little bit about the elements. So you can see here that we're using a lot of found objects. This is actually just a plastic plate here. This is some corrugated cardboard here. It actually has a funnel used for the top portion, so if you will, this way. The bottom portion is again a plastic plate. This is the lower portion of a spray bottle, and then in combination we end up having a little bit of a hut. You'll also notice that we have this textured hide, if you will. I'm going to talk a little bit about that in the next phase, but I just wanted to make sure I drew a little bit of attention to that. So you're going to notice that this sort of element is replicated through a number of the structures as well. Here you can see a little bit more of the tinfoil ribbing here and at the bottom of the tree as well, and then some of the exposed branches that have yet to get the floral treatment. Let's kind of rotate around, just kind of give you bearings. This is basically midway up the tree. That again is that lower platform. This is the upper of the lower platforms. There's one more that sets a little bit further down. And you're going to see that some of the tree is a little bit more bland. That's going to certainly feature a lot more of the bark, but we don't want to fill all of the tree elements in. We need to have some ability to kind of interact and move in and amongst the tree, and that's really important and something that I used throughout the build process, really making this a playable piece as well as a showcase piece. So let's move a little bit higher up the tree and see what's going on at the tree canopy. All right, I really wanted to draw your attention to the hide that I previously talked about. This hide covering was achieved by using poster paper or parcel paper. Sometimes it's called craft paper. Basically, you can find it in any shipping supply store or anywhere where envelopes or boxes are sold. And typically, what people will do is wrap parcels and things like that. Now, in order to achieve this, I just tore relatively square pieces of the paper. I layered them over. This is another existing funnel, or previously known as a funnel. Um, and then what I did is ended up coming in and doing a primary layer of a sepia wash. And then I went in and picked out various pieces of the hide with different sorts of brown. So I used a straight brown, I used a diluted brown, I used a skeleton horde contrast paint, anything kind of in and around the same brown palette. And it kind of gave me this patchwork that you see here. And just as I toggle out a little bit, you're going to see kind of what that looks like on the actual tree. This ends up being another platform here. In fact, I have a little bit of an entryway that I'm working on here, and that just simulates that you're kind of going into the tree itself. There's not going to be an actual physical access point, but I just wanted to draw attention to that hide covering just so you can get a sense of exactly what it is and how I went about doing that. There's a number of live videos as well if you scroll back to the Patreon, and you can see how those were specifically constructed. So let's get rotated to the other side. The Canopy Hut is one of my favorite elements on this entire build. It's actually a three-part process to getting it to this stage here. I'm working on the lower funnel portion here, the platform itself, as well as the hut. I'll bring you in a minute and have a look at the hut itself and kind of talk about some of the features and the work that went into that. Again, a lot of it was done on the live build, so if you scroll back a little bit, you guys can pick up some of the features there a little bit more in depth than I'll even cover in this recap. In addition, I wanted to talk a little bit about the canopy element that is sort of migrated. Originally, the process was to have it up here. However, I've brought it down here for a couple fundamental reasons. First and foremost, I wanted to make the play experience at the top level something that could be achieved. I thought with a canopy up here, that probably was unlikely. So I've moved down the greenery elements here. It also kind of creates a little bit of the illusion that we're running out of scope and out of scale. As I rotate this around, you're going to notice that I have a couple of these larger sort of truncated tree branches. These are designed to give the illusion of running out of scope and out of scale. And so by bringing these smaller elements down here, which will eventually have a canopy sort of featured on them, it's going to kind of lend to that illusion. I also wanted to rotate this around just to give you a little bit of context and bearings in terms of here's the smaller structure that we talked about, here's the other platform, there's a smaller platform there in the background, as well as this large hut. The hut itself is designed to add a little bit of scale, proper scale to the upper portion of the tree, where we've kind of morphed and manipulated that within the mid portion. Again, we've reclaimed that with the lower portion and the platforms down there. So again, you can see just a lot of the elements have, let's rotate this here, a lot of the elements have been carried on throughout the tree and right up to the top. Now we're going to come across to this little portion here, which I wanted to talk about for a specific reason. And this actually has the test layer of the celluclay. Now let me point out the fact that this is only the first layer and not the final bark coating. But the celluclay, we're going to do a specific tutorial on that upcoming. I just wanted to show you and illustrate that once the casting goes over, this becomes infinitely harder than the foam, and so this will actually go right over top of the floral tape rather. It'll go right over top of the aluminum foil. It goes directly over the foam, of course, and it's actually going to start incorporating and encapsulating a lot of these treetop elements and sort of feature elements right into the actual landscape of the tree. And so I'm really looking forward to seeing how that will take shape. So let's just go in. It's basically all the elements of the tree. We're going to discuss this a lot more in the weekly recaps. So if you feel like you missed anything here or want to know a little bit more about a specific element, please pop that into the comments and I'll make sure that I cover that in next week's recap for sure. So before we leave the Kashyyyk build, let's just talk specifically about the hut, and I'll bring in a close camera in so we can get a really good shot of that. Okay, so let's start with the roof elements here. The primary material used for the roof was the corrugated cardboard. You've seen that in the smaller structure as well. I just created a little bit of a template and laid that down. Basically what I ended up doing was two layering the roof because I have this sort of vaulted or elevated section here. You'll also notice that I brought some of the hide covering in, just kind of incorporating that within the build itself. Right now it has a little bit of a trim piece put around it, but you'll notice that there's a small missing patch, and that's a COVID-19 sort of side effect right there. I actually can't get this piece of plastic card, and so I'm working on ordering that in. So right now I have no color added to the roof, just simply because we need that last trim element. Let's go ahead and set that aside. We'll bring in the next portion. So we're going to do this upside down first. This is the lower portion of the canopy. Again, we've brought in that patchwork here, same postal paper or packing paper and same inking technique here. And you can really kind of pick out some of those hues. Although they're subtle, the intent there was to make sure that you had a little bit of a patchwork design. There's some more elements to go out here, so that will not look like a gaping hole as it is illustrated right now. You'll notice that the bottom portion here also has the radiating skewers sticking out here, and it has these sort of elongated sections here. They are going to be trimmed down. There's actually a piece that's going to run around the entirety of this. It's just a little easier to apply that afterwards, so I have left these long. I'll cut them off and paint the tips later. I'm just going to rotate this around. It won't sit nicely for us, so I'm just going to angle it here. And you can see again that radiating pattern out from the center, and really truthfully the pattern that I'm looking for is on this exterior or the perimeter of this round piece. The hut itself is actually going to sit here. However, this formation, this sort of design or pattern matches or replicates the lower platforms that you've seen on the tree as well. So again, just tying in those elements, keeping them very consistent, making each piece unique. I really want to make sure that each platform, each building, each structure really has a unique look and design and sticks out on the tree. At the same time though, I want to make sure that we keep within the same theme and everything kind of has its similar elements, or at least a portion of a similar element. So finally, let's zoom in and have a look at the structure itself. Okay, so finally we have a chance to have a look at the actual structure here. So I'm calling this again that Canopy Hut. Full disclosure, this was actually made out of a dog food dish. It was a new dog food dish, so that's just paint on the inside. But the bulk of this structure was actually made using a found object. And I'm going to have an article upcoming about found objects, and so hopefully you guys will stay tuned for that, because I really am a big proponent of building things out of found objects. Everything doesn't need to be made out of expensive material. There's a time and a place to purchase specific things, and sometimes there's just a way to use a cheap material. Just because you have cheap materials doesn't mean that you make cheap end products, and I'm a big proponent, like I said, of really using things that you can find around you. Primarily, it's not necessarily the expense that I'm looking for, but it's the shape. And in this particular case, I really wanted to use the beveled edges of the dog food dish to replicate this look. So let me just give it a quick spin before we kind of talk about each element. You'll notice that there's a replication of a lot of things around here. This entire thing is scratch build, is not 3D printed. And you're going to notice that there's a lot of elements kind of carried through this that you perhaps may see on some other elements on the table. So obviously we have these sort of these depth within the windows. This depth is basically achieved by vaulting out the sides. The interior of the door as well as the windows will be blacked out so that it will kind of give you an even better illusion of that depth. You're also going to notice that we have some of these rods, some unpainted portions. It's still a work in progress, obviously. The rods themselves are going to be painted this brass color, so hopefully that's picking up on camera. So those 4 are done. These are still in the brown stages here. Then we're going to tie this sort of non-metallic metal through. That's the gray portion that you see there. We have this small buttress here, and it has some of the bolts there. That was something that was captured in a reference photo, and so I brought that through. Some of the brass is showing there as well. And then we have this wood portion or wood paneling. Here's full wood panels, and then on the lower portions of the windows you'll see, and there's a good contrast of the brass versus the brown rods, and so you'll see that wood's carried throughout. This wood will find its way into several other structures that will go on the ground of the project. However, it probably won't be finding its way into too much more within the tree canopy itself. Again, I really want to make sure that every element that's in this, and the tree is a dominating structure for sure. However, it's not the only thing that's going to be on this table in terms of having height and size. I have both plans to do a larger building, something similar to this on the ground level, as well as some smaller huts with some significantly taller roofs, and so stay tuned for that. So any questions about this or any of the pieces that you've seen, please feel free to fire them in the comments. I'm going to bring you back for a little bit more of a face-to-face recap on this project, and specifically I want to talk about what we have upcoming and what elements need to be constructed going forward. Fantastic. Well, that concludes the recap video for the Kashyyyk build. Hopefully that was a little bit of a teaser in terms of what it is that I covered, and maybe whetted your appetite a little bit about wanting to ask some questions about some of those specific elements that you saw. So I'm really excited about the next phases of this build. In fact, we have some things happening tomorrow. I got one more video, like I said, what I'm going to be doing next, and I'm just going to be filming some portions of it. I'll record some clips, and then I'll do probably the audio overlay with you guys more of in a live feature. So hopefully you guys kind of like the combination of both live and pre-recorded, and certainly I think the weekly recap videos will be a true combination of both of those. So I'm going to be working with the celluclay tomorrow, and probably tomorrow and the next day actually, just getting a coat over the whole tree. So all the pink, all the green, all the brown, not the portions that I painted, but you know, the brown wire. All of that is going to be getting basically a skim coat of the celluclay, and then what that's going to allow me to do is really look at the structure of the tree, really look at the surface level of the tree, let me know where I need to add if I do, let me know where I need to change if I do, let me know where I need to add some additional elements. The first layer is also going to start solidifying in some of those structures that you've seen. I really want to have those structures for the most part kind of growing out of the tree growing around them, and really make it look like they're in sort of this symbiotic relationship, as opposed to being added on later. Then what I'm going to be doing is coming in with a thicker layer of celluclay, and that's where I'm really going to be able to create some undulations and some texture. I'll use a combination of tools to really bulk out and give it a bark-like texture. Like I said, it looks like kind of like a stony structure near the bottom of the tree, and then it kind of goes up into new growth. So I'm going to try to encapsulate that both with the celluclay as well as with the colorations and some of the natural elements that I'm going to be able to bring in to the project. I had alluded to at the end of the video about some structures that are going to happen, and I realized that I probably didn't lay out much of a layout conversation. That was done far earlier, and you guys can find the video for that. But what I wanted to talk about was the beach structures that I'm going to be doing, and I am going to be doing 2 small beach structures. I'm going to be writing an article, and so you're going to be able to see both the found objects sort of process or theory, as well as a build, and so they'll kind of mesh together in direct correlation. You won't miss any of that being a patron, so you guys are in luck. You'll see both the article as well as the build. So that's upcoming. I have to do 2 of those, and then I have to do 1 larger structure, very similar to the hut. However, it's going to be more open concept and be a little bit of an elevated structure in terms of it's going to be on stilts and off ground level. I really want to fill the underside of that with some foliage. So that's upcoming. So really we have 3 main structural elements to build. A lot of this build involved me building components to include with the tree. So I'm at that stage where I'm now starting to do the straight incorporation of the 2, and that makes the project a lot more exciting, really. Working on the stuff in solidarity or solitude, I should say, really didn't lend itself too much of a conducive theme. But now that everything's tied together and the tree's really starting to bulk out, I think you guys can get a better concept, better grasp of what's happening with this project. Of course, we still have to do some water and some beach and some lots of greenery moving forward, and that will all be done in the upcoming videos as well. So the goal basically this week is to get the skim coat done of the cellulose clay, and then the weekly recap will basically be a combination of explaining where I got, a small how-to on that, as well as just some action shots kind of showing the application process, as well as kind of how to prepare cellulose clay, and then some of my musings about cellulose clay in terms of how I've sort of evolved in my process of using it from my first time to now. I feel like I'm a much more proficient user of it, less wasteful, and I think I'm understanding the properties of the cellulose clay a lot better. But I won't tie that into the end of this video. I'll leave that for the next one. But effectively, hopefully you guys enjoyed the recap. I'd love to hear what you guys think about both format and the content of this video, what you're looking forward to, and anything that I can do to improve your experience here on the Terrain Studio Patreon page. So till next video, guys, thanks for watching, and I will see you later. Cheers.